Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Beneath the Impact Masterclass. So, a brief introduction about Beneath the Impact. It's a community of change makers being brought together by Impact, bringing together practitioners, leaders, and organizations to learn, connect, and strengthen the impact through shared experience and practical insights. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, George Kogolla. George is a development leader with over 20 years of experience in fundraising and partnership, leadership, and organizational development across Africa. Currently, he serves as the East Africa Regional Representative at IREX and has previously served many leadership roles at British Council, CFK, and Youth Alive Kenya. Throughout his career, George has closely worked with donors, foundations, governments, and civil society to mobilize resources, build partnerships that drive lasting impact. I'm looking forward to this conversation so that even to learn more on how to build partnerships as well as mobilize resources for our organization. So please join me in welcoming George. Over to you, George.
Thank you very much. So deeply delighted to have all of you join us in this conversation. And I think, when I was asked to speak, about fundraising and do a fundraising masterclass, I said the best I can do is to talk about my experience and not necessarily, take you through a technical masterclass. And fundraising has many angles. It has the proposal side where you write technically and get it right. But I feel that, before anything technical happens in that perspective, you need to have a relationship. And for me, it's the relationship building that is sometimes not given the attention that it deserves. And so allow me to then, over the next 25 minutes, just have an interesting sharing about my experience and what my journey has been, trying to distill it into those 25 minutes and just talking about each space and each place where relationships begin. And so if we could transition to the first slide, and I'll take a pause and share, and then we can begin to build from there. Wow. So as I was thinking about this, I thought about this, the strongest proposal, not being the one that gets funded. And in this scenario, it took me back to 2018, and I looked at both sides of it, where I've put in a proposal and where I've been in the scenario of reviewing proposals. And it's been, it was a fascinating one as I thought about this one, that I was on the side that was receiving the proposals and looking at them at this time. And I see a couple of colleagues that we've worked with, over the years and potentially were might be familiar with this scenario. So at this time in 2018, we had made a call for proposals for some work that we needed done as an organization then. And we were searching for somebody that could help us deliver. And this was sort of an intermediary role where we were going to re-grant somebody to do the work. And we received fantastic proposals. I remember one proposal really being good. It stood out technically. They had written it very well. So it was the strongest on the pile. Clear theory of change, a solid budget, superb CVs in terms of what these people had done. So on paper, it was, a no-brainer that they had won. But no one in the room, that had worked with this organization. And so no one had experienced them. And that then meant that, no one in this room could speak to what they were doing, how they'd done it before. But in the same pile then was a proposal of an organization that had spent 2 years with us. We had done work with them. We had been harsh on them as we were, doing work. They could respond if we pushed them to midnight. They took our feedback in stride. And this then really spoke to it. So in the room, There were people that could say, I know this organization, they deliver, and were able to speak, about what they were doing. But the stronger proposal arrived cold for us. And so, as you would imagine, the strongest proposal wasn't the one that got the job. It was the one that knew the people that were sitting in the room. And this is not corruption. It's humanity. They people as founders are managing risk. And sometimes managing risk means that you have to trust where you're going to put the resources. But the interesting thing in fundraising is that most organizations fundraise as if the proposal is a product. But it isn't. It's the relationship that's a product. The proposal is the receipt, that you give as a symbol of this relationship now is transacting. And so, so I just sort of wanted to put that in. It's not that, it's we behind each process of proposal of fundraising is a human that needs to connect, that needs to understand that you're solving their problem. In this scenario, I wanted to just talk about, how we approach proposals. And I will also, clarify that I have no beef with calls for proposals, but I'll explain. If you look at the scenario, most organizations fundraise by, going out and searching for a call, and then they write a proposal responding to that call for proposal. Then they submit it, and they hope that they will get the funding. But then on the right side, as you see on this slide, what really works is, first of all, you need to build the trust, you need to understand the funder, and then ultimately get into a place that you are co-creating. So the conversation has been done, they understand where you're going, and the final ask now of can you submit a proposal is literally just a formality. And this is the interesting parts of it. By the time you write a proposal, the funder should already know, and trust and want you to succeed. So just making that twist in a way that then we are not hoping, because hope is not a strategy as you've had in many strategy sessions. So build the trust, understand the funder, find an opportunity to co-create with them, and then the ask becomes a formality. And the left side actually in our sector, produces 5 to 10% win rates and permanently is exhausting. And we have been in that scenario. But I'm not dismissing the call for proposals entirely. There's still a way of introduction. So for me, what has been how to respond to calls for proposals at that 5 to 10% win rate is I'm getting into a new geography, or I'm getting into a new thematic area that we are not known for. So for example, at my work at IREX, there were times that then we were pivoting into supporting climate, but still finding our niche of supporting climate leadership. So which of course still rides on IREX's capability for doing leadership development, but in a different sector altogether. And in that space, then you can do calls for proposals, but you're doing the calls for proposals just to introduce yourself to the funder, not necessarily to win. So that ultimately they saw the proposal come into their front and probably somebody else won it, but they can begin to take note. And then you start building that engine of relationship to ensure that then you move forward. So can we journey into the founders room? And this mirrors, interesting conversations as well around policy development. Priorities are set early, if literally 12, 24 months. And as I was thinking about this, I thought about two scenarios, particularly for the priority setting bit of it. For many of us that then were, grantees or implementers for US government funded projects, the change in priority was captured quite early in this in the conversation. It was in 2022 that Project 2025 that really distilled the new thinking around the US government and the approach that they were going to take if a new administration came into being. This came in 2022 and was actually physically published. What the was called the Project 2025, was published in 2023. So 2 years ahead, that then really distilled where the strategy direction that was going. And there was a political side to it. It was saying, yes, it's a strategy. No, it's not the strategy. But a lot of the thinking, and even in foundations, then happened at least a year before. And if you end up, getting engaged, as you can see, if your first contact is the proposal deadline that for a published proposal, then as you see, you're 2 years late. Yeah. But also, program officers are the ones who champion what gets onto the board to make a decision. And inside every funder, there's a human. They either are talking good about you or they don't know you, and so they don't. Or they know you and they are not talking not good about you. And so they have to trust you to be able to then make that case on your behalf. And that's how they also manage their careers. So if you look at it from a funder's perspective and see them taking your presentation, if they recommend a partner that's unable to do the work, or a partner that has integrity issues and does not deliver in terms of what they want, it is their career that's at risk. And we've experienced this as an individual. I've seen this over and over, where we do tons and tons of exchanges with a foundation program officer as they prepare to take our case, and they have to completely understand what they're going to present, because they're the ones that are going to be in that room. They're the ones that are going to be asked all the questions. And not only that, once we established good relationships, one foundation program officer referred us to the next and to the next. Of course, the risk also came with the fact that if we tumbled with this relationship, and then it had a domino effect in the other relationships that we've had. And over time, I have been fortunate or unfortunate to experience that journey where the relationship goes bad and you begin to lose the various funders that you had in that link. And this actually holds across, bilaterals, the US government, the FCDOs, the European foundations. The machinery may differ, but the human dynamic doesn't differ. A third one that I really wanted to stress, of course, is that, even the open calls, as I had mentioned earlier, are won disproportionately by organizations that the funder already knows. So once again, the paperwork just confirms the decision that had been made, before the call was actually published. So getting to, and nice cold applications always lose to warm relationships every time. In our organizations, we map a program pipeline. We sort of figure out how this is going to move, but we rarely take time to do the same for our relationship pipeline, figuring out how to find a new relationship and how to nurture it and how to make it cyclic in such a way that then it continues to yield. And for this conversation, I wanted to take some time to just take us through what would be a relationship pipeline and how do you do it. And as you can see, it's a 6-step journey that I have here. The first 3 have to happen before you actually place an ask. And then the last 3, how then do you make sure that the ask continues, that it keeps giving? And the first bit of it, allow me then transition to the next slide, please. So what do we do before we ask? I thought about a practical experience that I have seen in my life, and it took me back to the year 2004. So I mentioned that I've been around for a bit now. In the year 2004, we were working on a project with children, and in this we had one of my friends told me that the Safaricom Foundation in Kenya had just been launched. So Safaricom, as a corporate business, had set up a foundation on the side. And the foundation was interested in a number of the things that we were doing, critically around children, around education, and around youth empowerment. And at that time, we were running a youth empowerment organization, but working very closely with children. And so my friend shared and said, could you then take your time, look and see what the foundation was talking about, because I think it would be relevant to what you were doing. So we took the time and researched a bit what the foundation was doing at that time, who they had been funding, and what sort of work had been happening at that time. And they'd been funding a couple of organizations that we knew that were in the network that we were working in. And so the initial conversation was, can we then leverage one of the programs that we had for ourselves to present to this donor. We looked at the strategy that they just put out at that time, and then my friend then accepted to make an introduction to one of the leaders at Safaricom Limited that had been appointed to be a trustee of the foundation. And I also researched this leader to just understand what were they interested in. They were a lawyer by training. I think they were leading the corporate strategy at that time for the foundation. And then what we were presenting actually had a really strong justice element to it, because it was working with children that were going through the justice system. So I asked for a meeting with him, and he gave me 30 minutes, and I had to use the 30 minutes to present to him. And I was lucky because he was a lawyer. He understood the language that I was speaking on. But he told me something that remained with me, because he said, I really like the project that you're talking about, but I don't know you. Who knows you? And I mentioned one organization that they were funding at that time. And he said, if you can get a recommendation from this organization, you're 50% in. And lucky I knew this organization, so I went to their office and asked them and said that Safaricom Foundation is interested in the work that we're doing. And they said that if we know you and we can get a recommendation from you, we would then get this support. The organization, of course, was gracious enough and was able to write a recommendation to us. But Safaricom still didn't feel confident enough to give us the money. So they asked the organization and said, we will pay them both the grant that we were to be given and pay them to manage it. And then they would manage us to report to the foundation. And it was an excellent and very stressful relationship, because this organization then did not also want to compromise their name. And so they decided to take it upon us. And I remember the first report we did was reviewed by 6 people in the organization. And then they called us for a whole day and told us, sit here, respond to all these queries, and do everything. And for the year of implementation, it was a joy. It was thorough. They took us through step by step of what we needed to do, but ultimately allowed us, by the end of that year, when we went back to the Safaricom Foundation and we were like, okay, we'll continue with our arrangements. This organization wrote to the foundation and said, we've trained them well, you can give them money directly. And Safaricom Foundation actually gave us a 60% bump on the initial funding that they'd given us. And that worked for us. But how in this scenario that I've set here, I've talked about research, that identification, which we do for many of the foundations that we have now. Research, see how what you're doing overlaps with them. I know that many organizations chase funders with money, but no strategic overlap. And that is such a waste of fundraising time, because that's the effort that you should have used on somebody else that would support you. But what then do we mean by engage? When you look at, engaging, I'm talking about ask for advice before asking for money. So there are things that, a foundation may know, because they're receiving proposals from hundreds of similar organizations in the space that you were in. They know the approaches that are working, they know what they do not want to fund, and then they also really, really know where the pain point is that somebody hasn't. That would be a really good starter for your conversation with them before you can ask for money. Okay, so you come, and how do you then really, really demonstrate your capability in the process? So you come in, and now ultimately, you're making an ask. So you have really gone out in the spaces where they are. You're showing your evidence, your results, they're interacting with who else has been funding you, and your systems are demonstrating to them. So a lot of the internal things that you as an organization, prepare before you get out such info money that I don't need to bore you with. So you've made all that, and you've demonstrated that you are somebody that actually they can fund. Then have a conversation of what problem they really want to solve and how you can figure it out. So in this ask, please just don't never let a funder's your proposal be, what the funder is encountering the first time that they're interacting with your organization. So you need to really be clear on a pre-proposal conversation. Co-creation is important for many of the funders at the moment, and use this as an opportunity to just really understand what they want solved and how this would align with what they want to give you. But I think a major pain is, once we've been given money, I think our problems, we think we've solved the problem, and you get on to implementation and do whatever you need to and finish. And sometimes there's a transition period. You've done well, you've reported well, you've demonstrated that you're doing this well. But the problem with us sometimes is in between. So let's say like your implementation has ended in January and you're trying to, get follow-on funding. But of course, you're also busy with many other things. And the funder, once it keeps asking for things and you vanish. Then you join the 90% that the funder will not want to work with. So you don't just go back when you need the next funding, but keep in touch. That grant period, when most organizations are completely have disappeared, is the time that you need to be the most attentive. So being in between grants, you need to do that. If you reverse that works. And I've experienced this in a current engagement that we have, where our implementation ended a couple of months ago. The donor continues to engage us and to ask for things, for make presentations to partner X, support this and that. And we've done that. And in the natural instinct is you say that, no, I don't think that this is fair because they keep asking, but we have no project running. That is a time for continued relationship building that then reveals you when there's no transaction involved. And so you need to really be alive to that beat of it. Yeah. So this one is one that I've learned painfully over time. I've been at instances where, actually early in my career, we had money from a single organization, got buried in implementation, and really enjoyed the project that we were doing, and forgot to search for more money. And ultimately, the money ran out, and we had hope on one other donor that was coming through for us. And for sure, they gave us, I think, the first installment of the funding that we were to receive. And then they completely, where they were getting their source from a large bilateral, then changed their strategy and stopped funding whatever they were funding this organization. At that time, and this was in 2004, I think, as well, this organization lost 500 million Kenya shillings. So that time, that was quite a lot of money, which was like about 70 or so % of their funding that was coming through to this organization. And so they were literally decimated. And we kept hoping against hope. And ultimately, they just couldn't pay us. They hadn't paid that money to date. But we had all the good talking, and we nearly wrapped up. I remember, losing literally everybody that was working with me at that point, save for one person that then stayed. And we had to rebuild. And from that time, we learned, and I put this regulation in my fundraising, that we should not have more than 25% of money from a single donor. And this was something that then we held, and I've held it over time. It's easier said than done, because sometimes you cannot get many, donors giving you really significant amounts of money, but it just is one decision away from closure. And we've experienced this, in even my current journey, where big shifts have happened in the development landscape. and we've then been completely stranded, meaning that then you shrink. And many of the organizations, particularly with the changes in US government funding priorities, you are aware that many organizations did not survive. And this has had a cascading effect even to smaller local organizations that then were working and relying, and just the sector in general. My strategy has been, it is okay and it's important, and I've learned it, that you can have a donor that's more significant. So you sort of kind of need a donor identity as well. So you probably would be known as an implementer of EU funding, or you'd be known as an implementer of British funding, UK funding, or US funding. But not don't let that be the identity that you have. Spread your risk. So get some money from foundations that support the thing that you're running. Get money from the private sector that speaks to what you want, and all of them demand different things. Lower indirect rates potentially, or more stressful in terms of what they are asking for, or greater visibility. If it's a private sector player, they want to do a lot in terms of publicizing what you do. And then, of course, the local giving and earned revenue. You can monetize the experience and the expertise that the organization has to then ensure that you are building on that. And local giving is an important one as well. We are always, particularly for Kenya, and I know the audience that we have is beyond Kenya, and it's also an African thing that we do, we're always contributing to something, but we need to really leverage local giving and really promote that local philanthropy to be able to support the work that we're doing. As I say, charity begins at home. So you kind of need to look at your surrounding and figure out what resources and opportunities are there to support the work that you do. But please avoid, one large donor 70% of your funding, or 80%, because you're definitely one decision or one strategy change away from failure. Yeah. So over time, and particularly in this season, we have been, looking around and searching for who can fund us. And funders don't fund needs, they fund solutions. If you're coming to a funder to fund your need, then you're coming as a beggar and not a partner. And so it's time that you change and flip it and ask whose problem do we help to solve? So how do you change this? Look at the donors, look at the solutions that they're searching for to the stated priorities that they would like to fund, and ultimately then support them to solve that problem. Remember, they don't fund needs. And in every time, and I have tried it in this space of desperation at some point, where you're telling the donor, if you don't give us this money, we are going to close. And trust me, you actually smell risk at that point. And so they'd rather just stay away from you. So the best thing is be a partner to the funder and solve their problem. Allow me to close with this, even as we think this through. Could you, in your mapping, this is assignment that I want to leave us with even before we get into the Q&A space of it. List some, 5 of your most important funder relationships. And then you can rate each of these honestly. Are they cold? Are they warm? Are they trusted? If you are not in the room, are they talking about you? Or if you're not in the room, then no one knows about you. Once then pick one and just commit to move it up, a level up. So the cold one, move it to warm, or the warm one, please take it to see how that plays. Dennis, back to you, sir.
If today's conversation sparked a thought, shifted your perspective, or started a question, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode, like, subscribe, leave us a comment, and join the conversation online. You can find us at beneath.the.impact on all socials. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep digging beneath the impact.